Jesus' miracles. Jesus raising Jairus' daughter. While Jesus was still speaking, some people came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue leader. Your daughter is dead, they said. Why bother the teacher anymore? Overhearing what they said, Jesus told him, Don't be afraid, just believe. He did not let anyone follow him except Peter, James, John, and brother of James. When they came to the home of the synagogue leader, Jesus saw a commotion with people crying and wailing loudly. He went in and said to them, Why all this commotion and wailing? The child is not dead but asleep. But they laughed at him. After he put them all out, he took the child's father and mother and the disciples who were with him and went in where the child was. He took her by the hand and said to her, Talitha Koum, which means, Little girl, I say to you, get up. Immediately the girl stood up and began to walk around. She was 12 years old. At this, they were completely astonished. He gave strict orders not to let anyone know about this, and told them to give her something to eat. Mark 5, verse 35 to 43. It all starts with Jairus' daughter dead, people wailing and crying because she is dead on her bed. Jesus heard what the disciples said to the men. While Jesus was still speaking, some people came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue leader. Your daughter is dead, they said. Why bother the teacher anymore? Overhearing what they said, Jesus told him, Don't be afraid, just believe. Mark 5, verses 35 to 36. When Jesus got to the house of Jairus and his dead daughter, the Bible said, he took her by the hand and said to her, Talitha Koum, which means, Little girl, I say to you, get up. Mark 5, verses 41. That is what exactly happened. Then suddenly, the girl got up and walked around normally. The father was just astonished by what had happened. Immediately, the girl stood up and began to walk around. She was 12 years old. At this, they were completely astonished. Mark 5, verse 43. By reading this, I knew that it told us that Jesus had power over death. He was able to control death, such as the story told now. He rose somebody from the dead, not only from this story, but from other Jesus miracle stories. There is a story about raising Lazarus from the dead, too. Another incredible story that tells us he has power over death was his resurrection after the crucifixion. Death of Jesus. Jesus calming the stormy sea. That day, when evening came, he said to his disciples, Let us go over the other side, leaving the crowd behind. They took him along, just as he was, in the boat. There were also other boats with him. A furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat, so that it was nearly swamped. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him and said to him, Teacher, why don't you care if we drown? He got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the waves, Quiet, be still. Then the wind died down, and it was completely calm. He said to his disciples, Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith? They were terrified and asked each other, Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him. Mark 4, verses 35 to 41. It was at night when Jesus told his disciples to go to the other side and go on the boat. Jesus fell asleep on the boat because he was exhausted after the walk and teaching with the crowds of people. Then suddenly, furious waves and wind came that almost made the boat drown. A furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat, so that it was nearly swamped. Mark 4, verse 37. His disciples became very scared and nervous, so they woke up Jesus. As Jesus woke up, he simply said, Quiet, be still. Everything was in peace and silence. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him and said to him, Teacher, don't you care if we drown? He got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the waves, Quiet, be still. Then the wind died down, and it was completely calm. Mark 4, verse 38 to 39. According to this story, it tells us that Jesus can control nature too. This includes storms, large waves, harsh wind, currents, etc. They were terrified and asked each other, Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him. Mark 4, verse 41. Even the disciples were astonished on how Jesus was able to control the winds and waves of nature, how the winds and waves can obey him as well. It also shows that Jesus was very human like us. As we are exhausted after long walks and talking, Jesus is also tired from the long walk, so he had to take a nap. He is not only the Son of God, but an actual human expressing and feeling the same way as us humans.